My parents told me there was no space for my kids at Thanksgiving, while my brother's whole family sat at the table. They even said, "We love his children more." What they didn't know was that I had been quietly paying their mortgage and bills for years. When I finally cut them off, they realized the truth far too late. "There's no space for your kids at Thanksgiving, honey." My mother's voice was careful, like she was carrying a tray of crystal glasses that might shatter if I breathed wrong. "You know how crowded it gets," she added. "The folding table is rickety. We don't want anyone uncomfortable." I stood in my kitchen in my Philadelphia row house, the cinnamon rolls I'd promised my twins cooling on the counter, sticky and perfect. On speaker, my mother kept talking as if she could talk me into good manners. "Your brother's bringing his whole family, of course. 4 kids, plus the nanny, but they're easy. We love his children more." She laughed a little at her own joke. Except it wasn't a joke. Not to her. My hands smelled like nutmeg and yeast. My heart smelled like smoke. "You love them more," I repeated, like we were practicing lines for a school play. "Because they're easier." "It's just logistics," she said brightly. "You know how sensitive yours can be, no offense. The last time they made a fuss about the turkey being too dry. You remember." "They're 8, I said. They said it politely. "Well," she said, "it's decided. We'll celebrate with you another time. Maybe the weekend after. Bring them by for pie." The call ended, and the kitchen felt bigger and smaller at the same time, every corner echoing, every cabinet too close. Across the room, my twins, Eli and June, were building a fort with couch cushions, planning what they'd say to Grandpa about their science fair volcano. They had practiced for weeks. One would talk while the other poured vinegar into the funnel. Kaboom! They'd promised. I had already bought the pumpkins. I had already chosen their sweaters. There was a time I would have swallowed it. I would have smiled through the sting and baked an extra pie. But that time lived in a house I no longer paid for. I used to wire my parents money every month, quietly, automatically, because when Dad's hours were cut at the plant and Mom's knees stopped cooperating, I wanted safety to be a steady current in their life. Mortgage cushion, utilities, phone, even the subscription for the security system Dad swore he didn't need. I paid, and they pretended not to notice, and we called it love. Now they were redistributing love like chairs around a table I bought. I wiped my hands and opened my laptop. The familiar tab sprang up, banking, the spreadsheet where I tracked due dates, the snoozy beige portal for the homeowners association fees. "We teach others how to treat us," I heard my therapist say, "and we ourselves are the curriculum." A text pinged in a family group chat that my mother had, for some reason, named Blessed and Busy. A photo, my brother's kids in matching fall outfits, cheeks apples, leaves aflame behind them. My sister-in-law captioned it, "Counting down to the coziest Thanksgiving. So grateful for family." A line of heart emojis trailed like confetti. Mom replied with a string of turkey gifts. My message bubble stayed a silent gray. I clicked into the autopays. I studied them with the calm of a nurse taking vitals. Mortgage support, $1,200 on the 15th, utilities float, $350 on the 10th, security system, $29. Wireless family plan, $198. HOA, $115. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a net, sturdy, invisible. I had spun it without applause. I had held them without touching them. I remembered Dad's hands showing Eli how to sand the edges of a birdhouse last spring, slow and careful, patient despite the ache that had settled into him like winter. I remembered Mom brushing a crumb from June's lip the way she used to with me, absent, automatic tenderness. The good memories were not lies. They were just not the whole story. I hovered over the toggle for the mortgage support. "Don't make decisions angry," my therapist also said. So I made a cup of tea. I sat at the table and traced the grain with my thumb, the line that curved like a river through oak. I listened to my kids argue about whether forts needed windows. When the tea was gone, the anger had cooled to something clearer. Boundaries aren't punishments. They are maps. I turned off the autopays one by one, like a string of lights after a party no one invited me to. A warmth rose in my chest that had nothing to do with tea. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Mom again, this time in a private thread. Sweetie, can you check if that little deposit for Dad's meds has gone through? He forgot to order early and the pharmacy said they'll hold them until noon tomorrow. Then another, as if she felt me pause, you're our organized one. We appreciate you. I stared at the message, the word "are" stretching and thinning until it was almost nothing. My finger hovered over the keyboard as the screen lit with a new message, this time from my dad, rare as a comet. Pumpkin Pie Friday? Save me a corner. Also, need to talk about the bank. Something's off. I looked at the twins, who had finally agreed that forts needed windows and were cutting them with safety scissors from an old cardboard box. Eli looked up at me through the new square of light and said, Mom? Are we going to show Grandpa our volcano? I took a breath that felt like a first step and typed, about the bank. Then, before I could finish, my screen filled with an incoming call. Mom. I let it ring once. Twice. 3 times. Then I pressed accept and said, Hi, Mom. Her first words weren't hello. They were a tremble. The pharmacy says the card declined. Did the bank make a mistake? I felt the quiet settle around me like a promise. No, Mom, I said softly. No mistake. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough for me to hear my own breath. Finally, Mom's voice cracked, the practiced cheer gone. What do you mean, no mistake? The mortgage draft didn't go through either. The bank must have. I cut her off gently. The bank didn't do anything. I did. I turned off the payments. A small gasp. Then, sharper, you wouldn't do that to your father and me. But I had. And I would. I watched my twins pretend their cardboard fort was a castle, June holding a crayon like a scepter. I thought about the words Mom had spoken so casually, words that left bruises, we love his children more. I don't want to argue, I said. But I'm not going to keep paying for a home where my children aren't welcome. She sputtered. It's not about that. You're twisting things. You know your brother has a bigger family. Then maybe he can help more. The silence this time was different. Heavier. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my journal, the one place I could let the truth spill without censoring it. The lamplight was soft, the house humming with the quiet of a neighborhood winding down. They didn't even try to hide it, I wrote. They compared my children, as though love were a competition they lost by birth. How many years have I paid? How many months did I bite my tongue? The numbers marched across the page. Over 5 years, it was nearly $100,000. Vacations they took, bills that vanished, even the renovation on their porch, my quiet support behind every nail. And for what? For them to tell my kids they didn't belong at the table. I closed the journal and stared at the pie crusts cooling on the counter. My hands shook, not with regret, but with something sharper, resolve. The next day, Dad called. His tone was lower, steadier than Mom's. Your mother's upset. She says you cut things off. Is that true? I hesitated. Yes. He sighed heavily. I imagined him in his recliner, rubbing the bridge of his nose. You know we've relied on that. The mortgage. I know. My voice trembled, but I steadied it. But you've relied on me without ever asking what it cost me. Without thinking about Eli and June. I can't keep doing it, Dad. There was a pause. Then, softly, your mother shouldn't have said what she did. The words were something, but they weren't enough. Not yet. Later, when I opened the family group chat again, I saw new messages. My sister-in-law had posted a photo of their lavish Thanksgiving spread, china plates, crystal glasses, children grinning around a turkey almost the size of my stove. Mom had replied with "so proud of our blessings, red heart." Dad hadn't written anything. My phone buzzed again, this time a private text from my brother. "Did you really cut Mom and Dad off? What's wrong with you? They need you." I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then, slowly, I typed back, "They needed to remember I'm a daughter, not a bank. Maybe now they will." I didn't send it. Not yet. But the words felt good under my thumb, like a match waiting to strike. Outside, a cold wind rattled the window, and I knew, the real Thanksgiving was still coming. Thanksgiving morning arrived colder than I remembered. The smell of cinnamon and butter still clung to my kitchen, but it wasn't the same scent of tradition, it was quieter, sharper, almost defiant. Eli and June sat at the table in their matching sweaters, coloring turkeys they had traced from their hands. "Are we going to Grandma's now?" June asked, her crayon stopping mid-feather. My throat tightened. "Not this year, sweetheart. We're making our own Thanksgiving. Just us." Her eyes widened. "But what about Grandpa? He loves my volcano project." Eli chimed in, "And he promised to taste my pie." Promises. I thought about all the promises I'd kept silently, hidden behind wire transfers and bill payments. Promises no one had ever asked me if I wanted to make. "We'll invite Grandpa another time," I said, smoothing their hair. "Today, it's about us." The phone didn't stop buzzing all morning. Calls from Mom, ignored. A voicemail from my brother, sharp and clipped, "You're selfish. They sacrificed for you your whole life. How dare you pull this stunt now?" A stunt. That was what he called me, choosing myself and my children. I deleted the message, but the echo lingered. By noon, while the turkey roasted in my oven, I saw a string of photos pop up on social media. My parents' dining room, lit like a magazine spread. My brother at the head of the table, grinning. His wife, perfectly styled, toasting with wine. Their kids piled on Grandpa's lap, wearing the sweaters Mom had knit for them. And there, my mother, smiling wider than she ever had in photos with my kids. Caption, "Grateful for the family that makes life worth living." I stared at it until my eyes blurred. The bitterness rose hot in my chest, but beneath it, something else stirred, a clarity I hadn't felt before. That night, after my kids were asleep, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down with my laptop. If my brother wanted to call me selfish, let him. He didn't know what I had done, what I had given, what I had carried for years. But soon he would. I pulled up the spreadsheet. Every transfer, every autopay, every note I'd made to myself when I covered their shortfalls. A silent history of my support. I scrolled back through 5 years of sacrifices, vacations I skipped, camps my kids missed, because I was too busy paying for a house I didn't live in. And then I began a letter. Not to Mom, not to Dad, not even to my brother. To myself. You have carried them long enough. You have nothing to prove. You are not lesser because they prefer his children. You are a mother. Your children need you more than anyone else. That is enough. By the time I finished, my hands shook less. The anger had cooled into resolve. The next day, Dad called again. His voice was low. "I saw your message to your mother," he said slowly. "About the payments." "I had to, Dad." There was a pause. She shouldn't have said what she did. About the children. That was wrong. It wasn't a full apology, but for my father, it was close. "They're your grandchildren too," I whispered. "I know," he said. And for the first time in a long while, I believed him. But when Mom's voice cut in on speaker, sharp and cold, "We'll figure this out without you," I knew this wasn't over. The storm was only beginning. The storm came faster than I expected. 2 days after Thanksgiving, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, but the handwriting was my mother's, neat, sharp, the way she used to correct my penmanship as a girl. Inside was a short note. We are deeply disappointed in you. Family takes care of each other, not punishes each other. You've embarrassed us, and your brother agrees. Don't bother coming for Christmas if this continues. No signature. Just the familiar, pointed flourish of her capital letters. I sat at the kitchen counter, the paper trembling in my hand. The words embarrassed us burned into my chest. Embarrassed, as if the years I had silently paid their bills were an act of shame, not love. When Eli wandered in, rubbing his eyes from a nap, he asked, "Mom, why are you sad?" I crumpled the letter quickly. "I'm not sad, baby. Just thinking." But I was sad. And angry. That evening, Dad called again, his voice unusually quiet. "Your mother, she shouldn't have written that." I waited. She's stubborn. But she doesn't see what she's done. To her, it's about survival. She thinks if you cut off the money, everything we built will collapse. "Dad," I said, my throat thick, "everything you built was already leaning on me. And when she told me my kids didn't belong, it collapsed anyway." He sighed, and for a moment I could almost hear the weight of it in his chest. "You're right," he admitted softly. "But she'll never say it. You know that." "I don't need her apology," I said. "I just need her respect. And if she can't give that, then she doesn't get my children either." That night, I opened the family group chat again. Photos of Christmas planning filled the thread, decorating the big tree in my parents' living room, my brother boasting about ordering a catered dinner, my mother bragging about the gifts she'd already bought for his kids. Nothing for Eli. Nothing for June. I typed a single message, my fingers steady. "Please remove me from this chat. I won't be part of something that excludes my children." And I hit send. Seconds later, I saw the 3 little dots, someone typing. Then a message from my brother. "Grow up. Stop acting like a victim. If you can't handle reality, that's your problem." I stared at the words, a cold calm settling over me. Maybe once, I would have tried to defend myself. Not anymore. I closed the chat, blocked the notifications, and shut the phone off. For the first time in years, the silence felt like peace. The silence didn't last long. By the following week, the calls started coming, not from Mom this time, but from my brother. At first, I ignored them. Then came the texts. "You're ruining everything. Dad says the mortgage is overdue. If they lose the house, it's on you." The guilt stabbed at me like it always had. But now, there was a difference. I let the pain sit instead of scrambling to fix it. I reminded myself of Eli and June, of the fort they had built, of their little voices asking if Grandpa would see their volcano. My children deserved more than a mother who lived as a wallet. When I didn't answer, my brother's messages turned harsher. "You've always been dramatic. You think you're better than us because you keep your little spreadsheets. Newsflash, Mom and Dad love me more, and they always will." I read that last one twice, feeling the words sink like stones into deep water. He wanted to wound me, but all he had done was reveal the truth we'd all been living around. The next morning, Dad called again. His voice was weary, as if every conversation aged him another year. "I don't want to be in the middle of this," he said. "You're not," I told him. "This is between Mom and me. And maybe my brother, if he insists on inserting himself." He sighed. "Your mother says if the payments don't come back, we'll have to refinance. That could cost us more than we can manage." I swallowed. Then maybe it's time my brother steps up. He has the bigger family. The bigger paycheck. The bigger piece of her heart. For a moment, Dad said nothing. Then, almost too quiet to hear, "You're not wrong." Those 3 words were more than I had ever expected. That night, I wrote again in my journal. The pen moved faster this time, my thoughts pouring out like water breaking through a dam. They will paint me as selfish. They will call me ungrateful. But I know the truth. I am drawing a line, and for the first time it is straight. Not twisted. not blurred by their expectations. My children will know that I stood for them even when it cost me. As I closed the book, a strange calm settled over me. A calm that came not from their approval, but from my own. The following day, when I picked Eli and June up from school, June climbed into the car with a bright smile. "Mom, guess what? I told my teacher we had Thanksgiving at home, just us. And she said that's special. She said we made our own tradition." Her words hit me like sunlight through a window. Special. Not lesser. Not forgotten. Special. I looked at her in the rearview mirror, her face glowing with pride, and realized she wasn't mourning what we lost. She was celebrating what we had. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something bigger. The first week of December crept in with frost on the windows and the smell of pine from neighbors' wreaths. My kids buzzed with excitement about decorating our little tree. We strung popcorn, hung paper snowflakes, and laughed when Eli tangled himself in the lights. For the first time, our home felt like it carried its own holiday spirit, not borrowed from anyone else's table. But as the season bloomed outside our walls, the pressure from my family only tightened. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I checked my voicemail. 3 new messages, all from my brother. "Stop being selfish. You're destroying Mom's health with your drama. If you don't fix this before Christmas, don't bother showing up ever again." Each word was sharp, rehearsed, like he'd practiced them in the mirror. I deleted them without listening to the end. 2 days later, Dad called again. His tone was heavy, not angry, just worn. "They're talking about you every day," he said. "Your brother, your mother. They say you've abandoned us." The word struck me like a whip. Abandoned. "Dad," I said softly, "I didn't abandon anyone. I stopped paying bills I never should have been paying in the first place." "There's a difference." "I know." His voice was gravelly. "But your mother can't see it. She keeps saying, why would she do this, after all we've given her?" I laughed bitterly. "After all they've given me? What about all I've given them?" He didn't argue. He just sighed, a sound that carried years of exhaustion. That night, while sorting through mail, I found another envelope from my parents' address. Inside was a photocopy of a utility bill, past due. On the corner, in Mom's handwriting, "Is this what you wanted?" I sat down hard at the table, the paper shaking in my hands. For a moment, guilt clawed at me again. But then I thought of June's smile when she called our Thanksgiving special. I thought of Eli's excitement, of the fort with cardboard windows, of my children's quiet belief that they mattered. I set the bill aside. I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was curt, "This is the bank. We need to verify your involvement with the mortgage on my parents' address." I frowned. They had listed me as a cosigner years ago, something I'd nearly forgotten in all the autopays and deposits. It meant the bank still saw me as responsible. The realization lit a slow fire inside me. They hadn't just relied on me, they had bound me to their obligations without truly asking. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, my pulse steady. If they wanted me entangled, I would make sure the truth came out with every detail attached. The quiet revenge had already begun. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the call from the bank in my mind, the word cosigner echoing like a bell I had ignored for too long. Years ago, when my parents had asked me to help with the paperwork, I had been in my 20s, eager to please, desperate for their approval. I hadn't thought twice before signing my name on the dotted line. They said it was just a formality, just a way to get a lower interest rate. Now I saw it for what it was, a chain. One they had never intended to remove. The next morning, I pulled out a box of old files from the closet. Contracts, statements, all the hidden evidence of how much of their life was tied to me. My hands shook as I flipped through the folders, but the shaking wasn't fear, it was power waking up. I found the original mortgage documents, my name neatly printed beneath theirs. And next to it, years of receipts showing my payments covering their emergencies. I spread the papers across my dining table like puzzle pieces. For the first time, I could see the full picture. I hadn't just been generous. I had been essential. Without me, their house might never have been possible. And still, my children were too much for their Thanksgiving table. That evening, Dad called again. His voice was low, almost whispering. "Your mother says you've been talking to the bank." "Yes," I answered plainly. "They contacted me as a cosigner." "Which means this affects me more than you ever admitted." A pause. Then, quietly, "We needed you." "No, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "You used me." And when Mom said she loved his children more, I realized I was never a daughter in her eyes. I was a safety net. For a long time, he didn't respond. Then I heard the faint scrape of his chair, the heaviness of his breath. "You're right," he admitted, voice breaking. "But if you pull away completely, we'll lose everything." I closed my eyes, picturing Eli and June building their cardboard fort, cutting little windows of light. "Then maybe it's time you learn how to stand without me," I said softly. After I hung up, I opened my journal and wrote a single sentence. "Love is not proven by sacrifice alone, it must be met with respect." And for the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. The guilt didn't vanish, but it loosened, like a knot untangling at last. I wasn't powerless. And I was done being invisible. The first snow fell that weekend, soft and quiet, blanketing the neighborhood in white. Eli and June pressed their noses to the window, squealing with joy. I watched them run outside, their laughter bright against the still air, and I realized, this was the family that mattered. Inside, my phone buzzed again. A message from Mom. "If you don't reinstate the payments, don't expect us at Christmas. We can't trust you anymore." I stared at the words, my fingers numb. Trust? They had trusted my money, not me. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to the bank. I attached every record I had, every statement proving my role. Not because I wanted revenge in flames and fury, but because I needed protection. When I hit send, I felt lighter. That night, I tucked the kids into bed. June whispered, "Mom, will Grandma still love us?" The question broke something in me, but I held her close. "Grandma's choices don't change how wonderful you are," I said. "Our family is strong. That's what matters." Her little arms tightened around my neck. "Then I don't need her pie," she said sleepily. I kissed her forehead, tears stinging my eyes. Quiet revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was the strength to say no, to step back, to let them feel the weight of their own decisions. And as the snow kept falling outside, I knew, Christmas would be different this year. December slid forward, each day colder, each message from my family sharper than the last. My brother accused me of being heartless, Mom wrote long paragraphs about duty and loyalty. But Dad's silence told me more than their words ever could. One evening, as I stirred cocoa for the kids, an email arrived from the bank. Their tone was professional, but the meaning clear. My cosigner status gave me rights as well as obligations. If my parents defaulted, I wouldn't just be on the hook, I could also request a formal review of the loan, even force a restructuring. Power I hadn't realized I held. I didn't share it with them. Not yet. At school, Eli's teacher pulled me aside. "He told me you had your own Thanksgiving this year," she said kindly. "He was so proud of it. You should know, you're giving them something beautiful." Her words followed me all the way home. For years, I had measured my worth by what my parents needed from me. But my children were measuring me differently, by presence, not by payment. The next weekend, we decorated our tree. The lights flickered, uneven but warm, and June hung a cardboard star on top. She grinned. "It's the best tree ever." I smiled back, my chest swelling. She was right. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. That night, I drafted one final letter to my parents. calm, measured, clear. I love you. But I will not raise my children in a family where love is conditional. I will not pay for respect I never receive. If you want to be part of Eli and June's lives, the door is open. But not on these terms. Not anymore. I sealed the envelope, knowing it would land like thunder in their house. But here, in mine, it felt like quiet freedom. Christmas morning came with the sound of laughter, not tension. Eli and June tore open their modest gifts, puzzles, books, a second-hand telescope I'd saved for. Their joy filled the room fuller than any expensive present could. There was no call from my parents. No invitation. No apology. Just silence. But I didn't feel abandoned. I felt released. We bundled up and walked to the park, the kids dragging sleds across the snow. At the top of the hill, June looked up at me and asked, "Mom, do you think Grandpa will ever come see us again?" I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "If he wants to, sweetheart. But remember, we don't need a big family around the table to be happy. We already have one." She smiled, and in that moment, I knew she believed me. That night, when the kids were asleep, I lit a candle by the window. I thought of my parents' house, bright, loud, full of people who weren't mine. I thought of all the years I'd carried them quietly, hoping love would grow where obligation rooted. But I no longer needed their table. I had built my own. And somewhere deep inside, I knew, the day would come when they realized what they had lost. When the mortgage notices piled up, when my brother's perfect life wasn't enough to keep them afloat, they would remember the daughter who had held them for so long. By then, it would already be too late. I blew out the candle, the room soft in its darkness, and whispered to myself, "We are enough."